Good evening. Welcome everyone to our Wednesday night meeting for Southwest Writers. And our speaker tonight is Marika Flatt. She is the 2021 Outstanding Austin Communicator. She's been a book publicist since 1997. In 2022, she and her husband launched PR by the Book. A connector by nature, she is a past president of the Women Communicators of Austin and serves on numerous advisory boards and committees. She's been a regular speaker at notable book industry events, including Book Expo America, since the 90s, and contributes to the statewide NPR show, Texas Standard. All right, Marika, take it away.
Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome.
It seems like quite a few months ago that we scheduled this. I think it was back in the spring, maybe. So it's nice to finally be here. Time flies, huh? So I will go ahead and jump in and get us started here. I thought I would give a little bio in addition to what Brenda told you. So basically, we celebrate 20 years this year at PR by the Book. So we are having a year-long celebration as business athletes in this book industry that we are in. And it's a fun place to be. I mean, obviously, we love what we do, and we have a fantastic team. We're a small company, so there's about 10 of us. And most of us are located in the Austin area where I am at, but we do have one publicist in Santa Fe. So it's nice to be talking to all of you over there in New Mexico and surrounding areas. I have a little fun history with your group. I was invited to speak at a conference very early on in my career. I was thinking about it. It was sometime between 1998 and 2002. And I came over to Albuquerque and spoke at the conference and had a great time. And this was before iPhones and Google Maps. And I wanted to walk to Old Town and really had no idea how far it was. And I just took off walking, and let's just say it was a lot longer walk than I bargained for. So I'm pretty sure it took me over an hour to get there, but it's a fun memory that I have from being at your conference so many years ago. So the reason why I am here tonight talking about book publicity is that it is a very important, necessary piece to your book puzzle. So really, you should be thinking about it before you even write your book, but seldom does that happen, I believe, after being in this industry for so long. But it is a very important piece of the puzzle. Nobody writes a book so that it sits on the proverbial Amazon shelf or in boxes of books in your garage. That's not the intention. It's to discover your readers, have people discover you, your buyer, your consumer. And, of course, that is your target audience, those people, but our target audience are media outlets. So day in and day out, we are finding media outlets for our authors and their books. Most of the time, we are hired by the authors themselves, just like you. Every once in a while, we are hired by a publishing house. We do have longstanding relationships with quite a few publishing houses. And so we'll work on anywhere from 1 to 3 books for them at a time. So, when you write the book, it is only the beginning. And hopefully when I finish this evening, you'll have a really good sphere of everything that you can potentially do yourself and what you might need the assistance of a professional to help you with. So we will jump in here. Let's get going. I'll reduce this over here. So here we are talking about book publicity. Now over the so I have been doing this actually 25 years. I got into book publicity right after I graduated from college. And I worked for another small firm for quite a while until they ended up selling. I actually had started PR by the Book before they sold. So I have been doing this for a really long time. Obviously, book publicity changes quite a bit from year to year, really. And so things that we're doing now are very different from what we were doing even 5 years ago. So I wanted to go through and talk about some things that have not changed, first of all. So later we'll get into what has changed. But what has not changed is that you need a great product in order to land media. So a great product is everything from a great book, good writing style that is appealing to the reader, and it's well edited, and it has a great book cover. So it's very tough to land significant publicity for a book that doesn't have a great cover. And we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. Now, something that also has not changed is the timeline for traditional media. So let's talk about long lead media outlets. So long lead media needs to be contacted between 4.5 to 6 months prior to your pub date. Now, that is primarily book trade publications. There's a handful of important ones. You all probably know about them. Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, Forward, Library Journal, School Library Journal. So this has not changed. Now, what has changed is how we are submitting those advanced review copies, ARCs, galleys, all the same thing. So that has changed. When COVID hit in March of 2020, nobody wanted to receive anything in the mail. So all of those outlets created digital platforms where publicists and publishers could submit books electronically. And so that has stayed in place. Now, there are some that still do like to receive physical copies of books, but that timeline has not changed. And of course, another thing that has not changed over the years is that the competition for this media space is very, very fierce. So as you can imagine, journalists and producers are getting pitched all day, every day. I actually, my husband and I also own Texas Lifestyle Magazine because I have stayed in touch with my journalism roots for the last 20 years. And so that's kind of a nights and weekends kind of gig, kind of a side hustle. But I can tell you that because I'm the associate editor and the travel editor of that magazine, we're not even a top tier publication, national publication. I easily get 100 emails a day. And so that kind of gives you a sense of, how thick that competition is. So if you have questions about timelines, we can definitely get into that during our Q&A session. I'm just trying not to spend too much time on any one thing here because there's a lot to cover. So we talked about book covers. So I wanted to show some of the books that we have worked on at PR by the Book over the years that have great cover design. So obviously there have been books that have come through that we might really love the book and love the content, think that the author has a great story to tell, but the cover does not stand up. It doesn't put their best foot forward. Personally, I am always recommending 99 Designs to authors. I don't have any affiliation with them. I don't even know if they know who I am, but I send authors there quite a bit because I have seen amazing transformations from before and after with book cover design through 99 Designs, and they're very economical as well. So there's just a tip here. The cover needs to stand out at thumbnail size as well. So don't underestimate the power of a great book cover. So let's talk about a timeline here as it relates to publicity. So I'm happy to share these slides with Brenda tomorrow, and she can send these out to everyone. So you don't have to take notes necessarily, but this is just a very brief snapshot just to kind of show you how we lead up to a book launch. So if we're working long lead media, you can see that we're working with an author 4 to 6 months prior to pub date. If somebody is self-publishing and they are skipping that long lead time period, we're starting a minimum of 2 months prior to pub date. Just like with everything else in our world, everything is taking longer nowadays. So we hear about supply chain issues. It's the same also with reviewers. Things are taking longer for them. There's more competition, so they have more books to read. So whereas we could have a very comfortable start date 2 months prior to pub date, pre-COVID, now we've kind of skewed more towards 3 months prior to pub date, but we still have quite a few projects that we work on where we're starting 2 months. But this is a good snapshot that you can see. For our PR by the book clients, we're always customizing a timeline for authors. Everybody who comes to us gets a free 30-minute discovery call with me. And one of the reasons for that, and yes, I do spend a lot of time on the phone, but one of the reasons for that is that we want to get to know your project. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about your goals. We want to talk about possibilities and expectations and budget, and really make sure that we're customizing for an author. It's not cookie cutter. Every author needs to have a different plan on who they're pitching, who they're going after. And some of the best publicity campaigns have very targeted media audiences. You might have a book that's, let's say, a self-improvement book, because I hate the term self-help, but self-improvement, and it might have an audience for parents and educators and lifestyle and feature and relevance for psychology, and the list goes on and on and on. Well, obviously, the more audiences that book has, the more comprehensive the book publicity campaign needs to be, the more media that you're going to be contacting. And so, we do look at that and customize and make sure that, we're keeping a project going a good solid, hopefully 2 months at least after publication date, because basically you're building up momentum, building. You want to ride that wave. And in order to do that, you need to keep it going well after pub date. So we have a lot of authors that continue their publicity campaigns months and months after publication date, because they're still seeing results, quite a few results. Okay, so let's talk briefly about Galley submissions. So this is a very common question that I get from authors when I do discovery calls. They have a lot of questions about how this process works, what the timing is, how long lead do I have to be prepared with my publisher? What is the timing I need to make sure that my publisher is meeting? What quantities do I need to be prepared for with the advanced review copies? So here's some answers to that here. So I mentioned electronic submissions before. That's our first line of defense, always, is going the electronic route. If someone says, no, I really need a physical review copy, then of course we always try to accommodate that. But PR by the Book has a NetGalley account. I like to point out that we were the very first PR firm on NetGalley when they very first launched, and we have stuck with them because we see that as being a good vehicle for getting electronic copies to media outlets. There's also, we utilize PDFs. You can do watermarked PDFs in terms of getting electronic copies to media outlets. And, I mentioned a couple of other options here, but, we have a pretty good track record of being able to use electronic copies versus physical copies. But I always tell authors, have at least one box of physical copies on hand. A box is around 25, just depending on the size of the book. Might skew a little bit lower or a little bit higher, but that's where we want to start in terms of having a stock of physical copies for a publicity campaign. So we're going to move on here. All right, so we talked about what hasn't changed, and now we're looking at what has changed. And of course, at Pair by the Book, we work very hard to stay ahead of the curve always, because things are changing rapidly in the book industry. And as you all, I'm sure, know, promoting a book in 2022 is different than it was just, a couple years ago. I mean, when you look at emerging media like TikTok, you've got book talkers on TikTok and booktubers on YouTube. And of course, we've had bookstagrammers on Instagram for a while. But, those emerging media outlets are moving the needle. And that digital presence is very, very important. We're folding that type of pitching into almost all of our publicity campaigns. And that's something that authors can be doing for themselves too, is getting out there, having a robust social media platform for various different platforms, whether it's Instagram and Facebook, or maybe you're on TikTok because you do well on video, maybe you're on YouTube. So having robust social media platforms, building engagement with your audience, getting out there, asking questions, finding out what they're doing, and then getting in front of other people online who have large audiences. That's key, key right now. So we definitely have shifted away from print quite a bit. I mean, yes, there is still, print is just, it's a dying breed of media, whether you're talking about magazines or daily newspapers. And so online is king. I mean, the viability of an online, what we call media hit, is a huge advantage for an author. It can be shared all over social media platforms. You can email it. It can provide one-click ordering. So the online and digital space is, really where it's at in terms of book promotion. Of course, our attention spans are shorter and shorter and shorter. And so because of that, we have to be more concise, not only with our pitches, but with the coverage that we get. So if you're submitting an article for publication, whereas maybe it could have been 1,200 words 5 or 8, 10 years ago, now it might be 500 to 600 words. If you're doing a live, let's say a Facebook Live, for instance, you might be keeping it to a minute. Obviously, TikTok videos are very short. So, just think in concise bites of information. Contributed content is really important. People in newsrooms, they're short-staffed, just like everybody else. And so having contributed content from people who can write is of value to them. And so you might be thinking about articles that you could submit. Listicles are basically an article in a numbered list format. So let's just say top 10 recipes to fix for your fall party or something like that. But of course, those are recipes, but you can make it a quick list of tips, something like that. So basically brainstorming where you can contribute is of value. It's going to be valuable to the media, and it's going to be of value to you. And, the conversations that we're having on social media are definitely leading the charge when it comes to news of the day. So if it's being talked about and discussed on social media platforms, you can bet that it's on news stations. The hosts and the reporters are talking about these topics because they're being discussed on social media. So that is that's a very important piece to keep in mind, because we want to stay in the conversation of what's already out there and what people are discussing. In a little bit, we can talk about timely tie-ins. I don't spend a whole lot of time in this presentation on timely tie-ins, but they are definitely useful. And I definitely want to touch base on those a little bit. Okay, so this here is talking about different written pieces that are useful. Now, keep in mind, it's all about being concise, clever, compact. That's the 3 C's. And so the old the old press release that we used to use, that's kind of dead. That is not relevant anymore. We use pieces that we call an experts page, which is a digital piece that we can link to in an email. A press pack is what you're going to see here on the left side. It's just basically a reformatted experts page, but it has all of the valuable information that somebody needs. Pitches are very short. A pitch is basically an email from me to you, if you're the media outlet, on why you should care. And it has to be very quick, very short, to the point. If we have a timely tie-in, like Domestic Abuse Awareness Month or something of that sort, that's going to be front and center in a pitch. On the press packs, the shorter the better. If you can get everything on one page, that's great, 2 at the most. But it has to be formatted in a way that that you see over here on the left, not just a whole lot of rambling information, but really quick nuggets. And having links to pieces in your email pitch is very valuable. Link to your website, link to your social media handles, so that you can keep it concise, but they've got other places they can go for more information. We're going to go back here to where I said contributed content is king. This is just an example of some pieces that we got at PR by the Book that we landed for our clients, where we were having an author create a piece, whether it be a full article, a listicle, or something like an opinion piece, and then we submit it. So always be thinking about those options. And we talked about this a little bit, but I can kind of circle back to a couple of other key points. So the newsroom, they used to keep a stack of books and basically turn to those experts that are book authors constantly for their expertise on various topics. And now they're finding those people on social media channels. So that's another good reason to keep yourself out there. Make sure you have a great brand online, that you're sharing information, getting into the conversation, being seen as an expert in your arena. It's a little bit harder with fiction, but still there's probably some key nuggets that you can pull out of your novel for that as well. And being able to turn information around quickly is also key. We're all moving at a very rapid pace. I mean, I am, you probably are, everybody out there has way too much to do and not enough time to do it. So the quicker that you can respond to journalists' requests, the better, because sometimes it's a case of the early bird gets the worm. So they might be sending out queries to quite a few people, and whoever gets back to them first is going to get the interview. So just keep that in mind, that you've got to be really quick on your response time. And just making sure that whatever your strategy is, or if you have a publicist that you're working with, that it's adaptable, that you can have some fluidity in it, where if there's news of the day that you can tap into, that you're really just turning on a dime and making sure that you get into that conversation. I wanted to read a couple of things. So I queried our publicity team this week as I was preparing for this presentation, and I asked them 3 questions. And I wanted to share some of that with you so you can get an insight into the inner workings of PR by the Book. So the first question I asked them is, what is one thing you're doing in 2022 that has proven successful that you weren't doing in years past to land exposure for your clients? And some of the responses I got back were much more podcast exposure, social media. You have to have an engaged presence on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. We talked about that. Spending more time pitching different kinds of media outlets such as newsletters, social media influencers, etc. So sometimes we forget about things like newsletters, but they could have a very large audience. And then another response was Muckrack, which is the media database that we use at PR by the Book, is allowing me to target emails a lot better, whether that's finding the right contacts at outlets or writing more customized pitches, even if it's just the subject line of a larger blast out there. So I hope that kind of is telling on how we're adapting as publicists to different changes. So the next question that I ask them is, think of one of your favorite hits. That's what we call media opportunities for our clients, media hits that you got this year. And how did that come about? So one response was, the best hits have come from top tier media because of the author's profile. Two in particular have huge followings. So what that means is that a couple of our authors that we're working with have very large platforms, and we're able to get national media opportunities because of that. Here's one that talks about Oprah Daily. So our publicist was going back and forth with an editor from Oprah Daily, and she pulled out at the last minute on one of the authors that this publicist was pitching, and the publicist was able to very quickly pivot to another client with a different topic, and then ended up circling back and having both of those authors come into conversation about a topic that they related to together. And so that was a very interesting turn of events, because it basically shows how, if one thing, it shows several things. One is that you can get canceled very last minute, but also if that happens, to very quickly adapt and pivot and offer something else that might be of interest to the media outlet. So personalized email is what works for our publicists. Blast emails used to move the needle. They don't anymore. Very customized email pitch is what works. Another response was, I got lost in a few podcast research rabbit holes, found some really targeted outlets, and the audiences may have been small, but both of the authors said that the experiences were great that they had on those podcasts. And then finally, the third question that I asked the publicist, what's the most important way you communicate with your client? So, there's a lot of different ways. I think that's one thing that sets PR by the Book apart, is that we put a ton of value on communication with our clients. So we are constantly in touch with our authors and making sure that we're in tune with what their needs are, and making sure that, sorry here. Well, we can go here. And making sure that we're meeting those needs. So here are some responses. I find a combination of mostly emails with supplemental phone calls and texting keeps us in touch. Another one said email only and calls at the beginning of the month. So that particular publicist does not use text. The next one says via text because it's the quickest way to get in touch. And then the fourth one said mostly email, but I like to suggest Zoom so that they know I'm open to face-to-face conversations. So that's just a little snippet from kind of behind the curtain, so to speak, of a publicist and kind of the day in and day out. Okay, so let's talk about we have trends in social media here, but I've got some other pieces that I want to make sure and get in before we get to Q&A. So here we're talking about, we all know that social media matters. I mean, it gives an author clout, it credentials them. It's a great way to get the word out about many different messages and sharing media hits. And of course, building your audience and offering, providing future opportunities. So those are all pretty obvious, pretty basic. When we're pulling in social media for a client, we're getting very creative these days with not only helping authors build their content and build their following, but also make sure that through our virtual book tours, which we're constantly running, we're getting the author in front of bigger audiences that various influencers have out there. And I'm not talking about the influencers that you have to pay to get in front of their audience. I'm talking about people like bookstagrammers who are just really passionate about sharing great books. That would be an example. And in our Q&A, if you want me to talk more about virtual book tours, we definitely can. Interestingly enough, we do utilize social media for reaching out to media outlets. So you can use this tip if you're trying to go after certain media outlets yourself. You can find them on social media and try direct messaging them and see if you can get through that way. You would be surprised at how often that works for us. And we do have quite a track record of doing that these days. Just a couple of other things, making sure that you're staying relevant and you're staying tapped into not only news of the day, but also, conversations that are out there within the social media platform that you're on. You can look at hashtags and just scroll through and kind of get a feel for what people are talking about. I mean, obviously, today, I was listening to the news in the background, and of course, it was all about the hurricane hitting Florida, and then you saw a lot of that conversation online today as well. So sometimes there's kind of like a highlighted news of the day topic. If something is happening that we're all trying to keep tabs on, but otherwise it might be just various conversations that are political in nature or social issue in nature. And, these are just kind of some basics, more about being online and making sure that you're branding yourself. And so I just throw out some points here. We're constantly talking about brands to those around us, our friends, our family, our coworkers. And obviously, most people are checking their social media platforms many times a day. And most people are on an average of at least 3 social media platforms. And so, there's a big controversy in terms of promoting books on whether, in terms of your social media content, if you should share the same content over social media platforms that are linked together. And depending on who you ask, you'll get various different answers. But, we like to say that if you have the time, it's great to share original content on various different social media platforms. Something that's very cool about social media and getting exposure online that is shared through social media platforms is that it's widening audiences on a global scale. So, now we can have a book that you might be writing in New Mexico, but it is hitting great in the UK, for instance, or in India or Africa or Canada, or random places that you're trying to figure out, how did I get a spike in that area? And maybe it's just something went viral in a certain place, and those are really fun things to kind of track and find. And social media makes it easy for fans, readers to communicate with authors, and that's a beautiful thing as well. We talked about one-click ordering before, that there's just, no replacement for that. With people having so many problems with distribution and sales in the book industry nowadays, it makes it easy to streamline and to not create more steps for the buyer, the reader. So in terms of brands, sometimes we think of brands as being like Coca-Cola or Nike or Doritos or things like that, but a book is a brand also. And because a book is a brand, you have to come about with your strategy, treating it like a business and having a business plan and having a solid strategy that you can follow and tap into at any stage in the game. You know, not only are the social media platforms changing, but the way that we're promoting books is changing rapidly. I mean, who would have thought that business authors would be on TikTok? They're on there, they're selling books. I mean, when TikTok was born, it was just for like tweens and teenagers, and now it's everybody on TikTok. And so, it's rapidly changing, and we have to stay ahead of those curves. But, a point in terms of being out there online is that for you as the author, it's also just as much about engaging with your readers and your fans that it is about building up your brand, because you have to build that back and forth relationship with your fans. I mean, even top best-selling authors are out there communicating through their social media platforms with their readers. But making sure that you have that solid strategy is very important. Maybe you're using a tool like Hootsuite for your social media to keep yourself organized. With Hootsuite, you can plan out your content, let's say 2 weeks in advance, and go in and schedule it. So you're not having to feel like you have to stay on top of that daily. But making sure that I always tell people to follow the advice of the best-selling book, The One Thing. My friend Jay Papasan was one of the co-authors with Gary Keller. And it's a great concept of not biting off more than you can chew. Pick that one thing for that week that you're focused on. And even if you have a publicist, you still have a lot to do. There's a lot that, you can be doing on your end, even when you have a publicist working on your behalf. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Okay. You can read this a little bit. I want to get to another important point of the conversation. But so here's a little cheat sheet about steps that you can take, deciding, what works best for you, not only what social media platforms, but what targeted media markets, who you're trying to reach. Make sure that your brand is consistent. This is something that a publicist is not most likely going to do for you, because branding is typically done before a publicist starts pitching the media. We talked about developing a strategy. Visuals are king now, so everything is visual. We're a very visual society. So whether that's images that you're utilizing on your social media platform or your website, or coming up with a very visual television segment, whatever it might be, you have to think in terms of visualization. And just making sure that, you're really being consistent with what you're putting out there, and that you have a really solid brand that the media will pick up on, because there's just a lot of competition. You have to rise above the noise. So one thing I want to talk about is author to influencer, because I think a lot of you here are in a category where you want to take control of your promotion. And maybe you don't have a money in your budget for a publicist. So we developed Author to Influencer Accelerator. We launched it at the beginning of 2020. It's for people who fit a variety of different categories, who are authors, but maybe it's because they don't have it in their budget. Maybe it's because they just really want to maintain that control over their strategy. Maybe it's because they're between books and their timeline, in terms of book promotion has settled down a little bit. There's a variety of different reasons why an author might be a better fit for Author to Influencer. But I put the link on here, authortoinfluencer.com, and I can tell you a little bit about it. And I thought about kind of walking you through on the screen, but I'm gonna just let you all do that. And actually, so we can, let's see. I want to just stop sharing my screen. Pause, share, stop share. Okay, now I can see your beautiful faces again. So I can answer questions about Author to Influencer, but it's a really important opportunity that I wanted to put out there. We basically created a 5-step success path for authors that starts with their preparation, and then it moves through product and their platform, their planning and their promotion. And so there's over 70 videos that we created on those different topics that a member has access to. So there's an education component. We have a private Facebook group that I'm in every day, answering questions. And basically the authors are tethered to me in that private Facebook group. Once a month, I do a live Zoom. So anybody can come in with their consulting questions. It's all part of the membership. And that's a great opportunity because you're not having to pay for an expensive hourly consultation. And then the fourth member benefit is that people can purchase blocks of time if there's pieces in there that they just feel like they don't have the skills to do. So I would encourage you very much to check it out. It's a way that I wanted to give back to the literary community after being in it for almost 2 decades. And providing this is something that is very economical for people who need that, basically like a concierge of sorts. So check that out for sure. And I wanted to leave 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So I jumped through a lot of this content, and I would absolutely love your feedback